Hello class, this is a video tutorial on basic trigonometry part 1. In this video, we'll learn about reference angles. In order to apply and use trigonometry, we must first understand the reference angle. From this, we will then develop to understand the opposites and adjacent sides. So, in a right-angled triangle, we should already be able to identify the hypotenuse. So how I teach this is if you see the right angle in a right angle triangle, the hypotenuse is always being pointed to by the right angle. So if it were rotated like this, we can still find the hypotenuse because the corner of the right angle is pointing to the hypotenuse. Another way you can find it is if it's the longest side of that triangle. So you can make it go this way. It's a little bit large, but I think you get the idea that the right angle is always pointing to the hypotenuse. Let's bring it all back. Now, because we know where the hypotenuse is, the reference angle is either of the acute angles in the in the right angled triangle. So the reference angle might be placed here, or it might be placed here. Okay, so depending on where it's placed, right, is where we're going to work from. So now from the reference angle, so let's just say that the reference angle is here. From the reference angle, the side that is considered opposite is furthest away. So this is the angle. The side that's furthest away, this side will now be considered the opposite. OPP. The side next to the reference angle that's not the hypotenuse is the adjacent side. So from the angle, the reference angle, there are two sides that are right beside it. So we have the hypotenuse and the other side. It's this other side that will now be considered the adjacent side. Okay, so if the reference is here, this is opposite and this is adjacent. But if the reference is placed over here, what is opposite and what is adjacent will change. So we must always be thinking about where the reference angle is placed, because what is opposite and what is adjacent changes depending on where the reference angle is placed. All right, so let's do a few short exercises for this. So now I've placed a reference angle in each of these. Okay, so now in these three triangles, I'd like for you to identify the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent, depending on where the reference angle has been placed. So you can pause the video and give this a go. Okay, so let's answer this right about now. So in this triangle, the hypotenuse is opposite the 90 degrees. So we'll say that C, so side C is the hypotenuse, and the opposite side is the one furthest away. So A is opposite and B is adjacent. Okay, let's give this one a go as well. Once again, from here, the 90-degree angle is pointing to the hypotenuse. So that's the hypotenuse here is 14. The opposite is furthest away from 40 degrees because that there is the angle given as reference. So that there is is P, and the adjacent is Q. And lastly here, once again, the 90 degrees is pointing to the hypotenuse. So in here, the hypotenuse is x. The opposite from the given angle is 12.14. And the adjacent side is the one closest to it, which is 18. Okay, so I hope that, got you started and thinking about where the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse is in a right angle triangle from a given reference angle. And as we've seen, the opposite and adjacent, they change depending on the position of the reference angle. So here I've given two reference angles for each of them, and you'll see that what is opposite and adjacent, depending on where it's from, changes. So I'll demonstrate to you the first one here. So in this first one, I'm looking at this triangle here. The hypotenuse never changes. It's always being pointed to by the 90 degrees. So in this case, the hypotenuse is 5. But from the angle alpha, so our reference angle here is alpha, or A. The opposite side from alpha is Q. And the adjacent side from alpha is P. Now take a look. If we say that from beta, angle beta or angle B, opposite is now P, and adjacent from beta is Q. So can you see that depending on where we are referencing from, opposite and adjacent change? Okay, so go ahead, you can pause the video and give this a go. Answer the last two here. So let's answer these right about now. So from here, in this triangle, we have a 90 degrees. Pointed to is going to be the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse here is Z. And from the angle 32, Y is opposite and X is adjacent. Y is opposite because it's furthest away, and X is adjacent. But from the angle 48 degrees, X is opposite because it's furthest away, and adjacent is Y. And lastly here, the hypotenuse here is B, and from the angle X, 12 is opposite, and adjacent is side A, because this is furthest away, that's the opposite, and A is closest, so that is adjacent. And it leaves us with angle 14 degrees. The opposite from here is A, and adjacent from here is 12. So I hope that gave you an insight into the reference angles and learning what opposite and adjacent is depending on the angle we are referencing from. So I hope that gives you an insight into reference angles, opposites, and adjacents. I hope to see you in the next video. Best of luck.